Imagine a world where every word you say, every gesture you make, and every decision you take is being watched, not by your friends, not by your peers, but by someone who is supposed to care for you the most. Now, picture this happening not just once or twice, but constantly throughout the course of a relationship. Sounds unsettling, right? But the truth is, many men unknowingly or sometimes knowingly test women throughout their relationships. It's subtle, it's often disguised as care or concern, but make no mistake, it's a manipulation. Today, I want to talk about why this happens, how it happens, and what we can do about it. At the heart of this behavior, we often find something deeply human, an insecurity that men sometimes don't know how to express. Men, like women, carry their own vulnerabilities, but the way they process and express these vulnerabilities is often different. For many men, it's not that they don't trust you, it's that they don't trust themselves. They don't trust that they are worthy of the love they have, that they are capable of being the partner you need, or that they can meet the expectations of the relationship without failing. So instead of addressing this insecurity openly, they try to test you. Let's be honest for a moment. We live in a world that expects men to be strong, to be stoic, to not show weakness. Society often defines strength by silence, by control, by an unwillingness to reveal any form of vulnerability. Men are expected to stand firm, to keep their emotions in check, and to never let anyone see them falter. And that pressure, that expectation becomes overwhelming. What happens when the mask starts to crack? What happens when the wall they've built to guard their vulnerabilities begins to break down? The fear is palpable. The fear of being exposed, of being judged for not being enough becomes crippling. So what do? They pull back. They distance themselves emotionally. But here's the twist. That distance is not a sign of disinterest or loss of affection. In many cases, it's actually the opposite. That emotional withdrawal is a test. It's a test of commitment. It's a test to see if you will still stay even when they're not showing you their best self. Because deep down, they're wondering, will you still love me when I'm not my strongest? When I'm not my best? Will you still care when I'm not the person I'm trying so hard to be? This fear isn't something they talk about. It's not something that can be easily understood by those who haven't experienced it, but it's real and it's powerful. And it leads to tests, subtle, often unconscious tests. If a man starts pulling away, acting distant, or even challenging you in ways that don't make sense, it's often because he's testing you, not because he doesn't care about you, but because he doubts himself. He's trying to see if you will stay. He's looking for reassurance, but he doesn't know how to ask for it directly. So instead, he pulls away, watching closely to see how you'll react. He wants to know, will you stay when I'm not perfect? Will you stand by me when I'm not being the partner I'm supposed to be? Consider the case of Mark and Julia. Mark was the type of man who always held everything in. He was strong on the outside, rarely showing his vulnerabilities. Julia, on the other hand, was open, expressive, and always willing to share her feelings. They were a good match in many ways, but there was one thing that would often make their relationship difficult: Mark's tendency to pull away when things got tough. One day, without warning, Mark began to act distant, emotionally withdrawn. Julia, confused and hurt by the sudden coldness, reached out to him, but the responses she received were short, distant, and unengaged. She didn't understand. Had she done something wrong? Had she lost his love? What Julia didn't realize at the time was that Mark wasn't pulling away because he had lost interest. He was testing her commitment. He was withdrawing emotionally to see if she would still reach out, to see if she would still care enough to fight for the relationship, to prove that she loved him even when he was being distant. It wasn't about her, it was about him. He was testing whether or not she would still love him when he wasn't at his best, when he was wrapped in his own fear and insecurities. In many ways, Mark's actions weren't about testing Julia's loyalty, They were about testing his own worth. The test was for him, not for her. He needed to know on some level that he was enough, that he was worthy of the love he was receiving. And so instead of asking for reassurance directly, he tested it by pulling away. He needed to see if even when he was emotionally distant, Julia would still stay. This is the subtle and often misunderstood nature of insecurity. It doesn't show itself in clear words. It doesn't announce its presence with loud declarations. Instead, it manifests in quiet, hidden ways. The tests that men sometimes impose on the people they love are not meant to hurt. They are not designed to destroy. They are born from a place of fear, from a place of needing to know that even when they are at their weakest, they are still worthy of love. They want to know that they are enough. And when they can't find a way to ask for that reassurance openly, the tests begin. The real tragedy is that these tests rarely address the root cause of the fear. They only reinforce the insecurity. They don't provide the healing or connection that is so desperately needed. Instead, they push people away, creating confusion and distance where there should be understanding and support. But it doesn't have to be this way. Because when we understand why these tests happen, when we see them for what they really are, expressions of fear and vulnerability, we can respond with empathy. We can choose to not just pass the test, but to help heal the wound behind it. And in doing so, we can begin to build a relationship that is not based on fear, but on trust, understanding, and love. The tests men sometimes put women through don't always appear in obvious ways. These tests are subtle, woven into the fabric of everyday interactions, hidden in plain sight. Often they take the form of mixed signals, those moments when what's said doesn't align with what's felt. A casual comment here, a distant glance there, a delay in response, or an action that seems contradictory. At first, it might not seem like a big deal, but make no mistake, these are not random behaviors. They are carefully calculated actions intended to measure something much deeper. They are tests. And while they might not be loud or dramatic, they can have an outsized impact on a relationship. What's at play here is a subtle form of manipulation, though that word might not always feel fair. After all, the intention behind these tests is often not malicious, but driven by a need, sometimes a desperate one, to feel secure. When a man tests his partner, it's not because he doesn't care about her. In fact, it's often the opposite. He's unsure of how much she cares about him, and these tests are his way of checking. Do you love me even when I'm at my worst? Is the question echoing behind the silence, the distance, the mixed signals? For example, a man might suddenly stop responding to messages or purposely delay replying to see if the woman will reach out first. At the surface level, it's just a text message or a phone call. But what's really happening is much more significant. The test is not about the message. It's about gauging commitment. He wants to know on some level if she will chase after him, if she will care enough to make the first move. There's a vulnerability here that isn't being addressed. He's asking, will you still care enough to fight for me, even when I'm not giving you the attention you deserve? And when this behavior goes unnoticed or unaddressed, it begins to chip away at trust. It's what starts as a small test can grow into something more damaging over time. In another scenario, the questions may seem innocent. Perhaps he asks about her past relationships, probing into territory that on the surface might seem like casual conversation. But when you dig deeper, it becomes clear he's testing her security. He's trying to see if there's a part of her past that could be a threat to his place in her life. It's a question not of curiosity, but of insecurity. He's looking for reassurance, not that she's just telling the truth, but that she's emotionally secure enough to be fully invested in the present, in him. And yet, while it may feel like an innocent question, It's a subtle manipulation nudging her to prove herself over and over again. But perhaps the most damaging manifestation of this kind of test is when a man subtly challenges a woman's independence. It could be a comment that undermines her decisions or a suggestion that she's spending too much time on her career, her friends, or her passions. He might question her choices, trying to see if she will compromise, alter her plans, or shift her priorities to accommodate him. This isn't a healthy negotiation of needs in a relationship. It's a test, a challenge of whether her love for him is strong enough to shape her identity around him. Take Sarah and Ryan, for example. Ryan had always been emotionally distant, but Sarah loved him deeply. She had always been there for him, supporting him through tough times, showing him affection and care. One day, Ryan decided to test Sarah's commitment in a way that felt harmless at first. He pretended to forget their anniversary. When Sarah confronted him, hurt and confused, Ryan's response was calm, almost indifferent. "I'm just seeing if you care enough to remind me." In that moment, Ryan wasn't genuinely forgetting their anniversary. It wasn't about the date or the celebration. It was about something deeper. Ryan was testing Sarah's love for him. He wanted to see if she would still care, still show up for him, even when he wasn't making the effort. His actions weren't a simple mistake. They were a deliberate attempt to test the strength of her feelings for him. The problem here is that these tests, though often subtle, create an atmosphere of distrust. Over time, if these actions go unaddressed, they erode the foundation of a relationship. Sarah was left questioning Ryan's sincerity, wondering why he would test her in such an emotional way. These tests, though they may seem small and unimportant in the moment, can have a cumulative effect. The more they happen, the more they make you question the motives behind each action, each word. They slowly plant seeds of doubt where trust should thrive. If this behavior isn't recognized and confronted, it can lead to feelings of inadequacy, frustration, and confusion, and eventually it will take a toll on the relationship. Trust, once broken, is much harder to rebuild. The key to breaking this cycle is awareness. It's about recognizing these tests for what they are, expressions of fear and insecurity, not genuine concerns about the relationship itself. Once we understand that these actions are a reflection of the person testing, not the person being tested, we can begin to address them with empathy and honesty. Relationships are about growth, and part of that growth comes from understanding and confronting the fears that lead to these subtle manipulations. When we stop playing games and start communicating openly, we create an environment where trust can flourish and where both partners can feel secure in the relationship. Without that security, these tests will only continue, but with it, the tests become irrelevant and the relationship becomes stronger for it. Why does this behavior persist? Why do men, despite their best intentions, resort to testing the women they love, often in ways that can be hurtful and confusing? At its core, the answer lies in emotional immaturity. Many men are simply not taught how to navigate the complexities of their emotions. They're not taught to express vulnerability, to communicate openly about their fears and insecurities. Instead, they grow up learning to mask those feelings, suppress them, or worse, let them fester. The result? When they feel uncertain, they don't know how to reach out. They don't know how to express what they're really feeling. So instead of communicating openly, they fall back on tactics, manipulative tests, subtle games, or emotional withdrawal, all in an attempt to find the reassurance they need. It's easy to look at these actions from the outside and think that they're intentional or malicious, but often they're born from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being seen as weak, fear of showing that they're not perfect. When a man tests a woman, it's not because he wants to hurt her. It's because on some level, he doesn't know how to ask for the reassurance he craves. He's too afraid to be vulnerable, too insecure to open up and say, I need you to show me that you care. I need to know that you'll still love me when I'm not perfect. But here's the truth. This behavior doesn't have to continue. Men can grow emotionally. They don't have to remain stuck in these patterns of testing and manipulating. There is another way forward, a way that requires courage, the courage to be vulnerable, to open up about what's really going on inside, and to ask for what they need without fear of judgment or rejection. Emotional growth is not an easy path. It requires effort. It requires self-awareness, a willingness to face one's fears head-on, and the patience to allow that growth to unfold over time. The first step is acknowledging that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. The willingness to be vulnerable is what allows a relationship to deepen. It's what makes connection possible, and it's the foundation upon which trust is built. But vulnerability is terrifying, especially for someone who has spent their entire life suppressing their feelings, hiding behind emotional walls. To break those walls down requires a shift in mindset, a commitment to real communication, and a willingness to confront the very fears that led to the tests in the first place. Take, for example, John, a man in his late 30s who had been in several relationships, but none of them lasted. Each one fell apart, not because the love wasn't real, but because John never fully opened up. Instead, he would resort to tests, subtle, passive-aggressive ways of gauging his partner's commitment. When he felt insecure, he would pull away emotionally or ask questions designed to see how much his partner really cared. Each time, he thought he was protecting himself. After all, if he could make them prove their love, then he wouldn't have to expose his vulnerability. But time and time again, those tests led to the same result. The relationships ended not because of a lack of love, but because John's fear kept him from truly connecting. He finally realized that the common thread in every breakup wasn't the women he was with, but his own inability to communicate openly. He understood that by testing his partners, he was never giving them the chance to show him their love in a genuine, unguarded way. He wasn't allowing them to meet him where he needed them. Instead, he was keeping them at arm's length, pushing them away with his walls, and never giving them the chance to break through. It was only when John decided to seek therapy that things began to change. He learned how to express his fears and insecurities without using tests to force answers. He learned how to communicate directly, to ask questions without pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. It wasn't easy at first. He had to face a lot of uncomfortable emotions, and there were moments when he felt exposed and vulnerable in ways he had never experienced before. But it was real, it was authentic, and it made all the difference. John's relationship with Rachel, his current girlfriend, became one of trust and openness. Instead of withdrawing or testing her, John learned to communicate his fears, his insecurities, and his hopes. He no longer needed to play games to see if she would stay. He knew that real love was about building that connection through vulnerability, not through manipulation. Rachel, in turn, felt safer with him, knowing that she didn't have to guess his feelings or navigate his emotional tests. She could simply be there for him without the constant uncertainty. John's journey wasn't perfect. It wasn't without its struggles, but through emotional growth and a commitment to honest communication, he was able to transform his relationships. He learned that vulnerability, though terrifying, was the only path to deeper intimacy and connection. By letting go of his fear and embracing his emotions, he created a relationship built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. And in doing so, he found something far more powerful than security, a genuine, lasting bond. This is what emotional growth looks like. It's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about having the courage to show up as you are, to communicate openly, and to trust that the people who truly love you will meet you there. And in doing so, we can create relationships that are not defined by fear, but by love and connection. When a relationship becomes a series of tests, it slowly transforms from a partnership built on trust and mutual respect into a game of uncertainty and emotional turmoil. Every time a man tests a woman, it chips away at the foundation of the relationship. Initially, it may seem like a small thing, an action that is easy to dismiss or ignore, but as these tests accumulate, the impact grows. Over time, the woman starts to question, is this relationship real, or is it just another game I'm being asked to play? And once that doubt starts to take root, it doesn't go away. It festers and it spreads. The emotional toll of being constantly tested is profound. It's not just the confusion or the frustration. It's the deep sense of emotional exhaustion that sets in after months or even years of living in a constant state of uncertainty. When someone is always testing you, it forces you to constantly question your worth, your actions, and your place in the relationship. You begin to wonder, am I enough? Am I doing enough? Do they truly love me? Or am I just being tested over and over again to prove my loyalty, my commitment, my value? This cycle of questioning, of second guessing yourself is draining. It can break even the strongest person down. No matter how much love or care you invest, the constant emotional roller coaster takes its toll. The stress of never knowing if you're truly loved, or if you're simply a pawn in a game, wears you thin. It's exhausting to be constantly on edge, always waiting for the next test, always wondering if you've done enough to meet the ever-changing expectations. You begin to feel undervalued, misunderstood, and disconnected, not just from your partner, but from yourself. Take Laura and David, for example. In the early days of their relationship, everything seemed fine. David was distant at times, but Laura thought it was just part of his personality. She understood that everyone deals with stress differently, and she assumed his emotional withdrawal was simply his way of coping. But over time, the pattern became clear. Whenever David was stressed, he would shut down, ignoring Laura's attempts to connect. He expected her to chase him, to prove her loyalty, to fight for the relationship. At first, Laura played along, thinking it was just part of their dynamic. She would reach out, try to bring him back, reassure him that she was there for him. But as the tests continued, something inside her began to shift. The more David withdrew, the more Laura questioned if she was really with the right person. She started to feel as though she was playing a game with no clear rules, no clear objective. She couldn't tell if David truly wanted to be with her or if he was just testing her, pushing her to prove her commitment over and over again. And that doubt, that uncertainty began to erode her trust in him. Eventually, Laura became emotionally drained. The constant testing had taken its toll. She no longer felt the joy or security that should come with a loving relationship. Instead, she felt like she was walking on eggshells, never knowing if her next move would be enough to satisfy David's unspoken needs. It wasn't that they didn't love each other. Laura still cared deeply for him, and David still had feelings for her. But the testing, the emotional manipulation, had created a wedge between them. Trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild. The emotional toll of that continuous testing became too much to bear, and the relationship ended, not because the love wasn't there, but because the trust had been eroded piece by piece by the constant emotional strain of being tested. This is the damage that continuous testing causes. It creates doubt where there should be trust. It replaces love with insecurity. It strips away the emotional energy that should be devoted to nurturing the relationship and instead forces it into a constant cycle of proving worth. And over time, this emotional burnout takes its toll. No one can thrive in a relationship built on uncertainty and emotional manipulation. What was once a relationship based on mutual care becomes a battleground for emotional survival, where both people are exhausted, unsure, and disconnected. The reality is that love isn't about testing someone's loyalty or their ability to withstand emotional withdrawal. Love is about understanding, about connection, and about building trust through open communication. When we choose to play these games, when we choose to test someone rather than communicate our needs directly, we risk losing the very thing we're trying to protect. The longer the testing continues, the more it erodes the foundation of the relationship until one day the trust is gone and the emotional exhaustion is too much to overcome. The key to breaking this cycle is simple: honesty, vulnerability, direct communication. Instead of playing games or running tests, we must find the courage to be open about our needs and insecurities. When we communicate honestly, we allow ourselves and our partners to feel safe, to feel valued, and to feel truly loved. That's the kind of relationship that can stand the test of time. When we think about the relationships in our lives, there's one core element that everything else hinges on: trust. Trust is the foundation of any lasting bond. It is the invisible thread that ties two people together, providing a sense of security, safety, and mutual respect. When trust is present, it allows both partners to be themselves, to open up, to share their thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. But what happens when that trust begins to fray? What happens when the foundation that you're building on starts to crack? One of the most dangerous things that can happen in a relationship is when trust is undermined by testing. Testing your partner's loyalty, patience, or commitment may seem harmless at first, but it's one of the most corrosive actions you can take. When you test your partner, when you manipulate or provoke them to see if they'll stay or if they'll react the way you want, you're not showing respect for them. You're showing doubt. And when doubt seeps into a relationship, it doesn't just make things uncomfortable, it erodes the very foundation of what you're trying to build. If we're honest with ourselves, we know that testing is often rooted in fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of being hurt, fear of rejection. But testing is not the way to deal with those fears. Testing doesn't build trust, it destroys it. When you test someone, you're essentially telling them, I don't believe in you enough to trust you. I need to see if you'll stay, if you'll care, if you'll prove yourself to me over and over again. And every time you do that, you create distance. You create an invisible wall between you and the person you care about. Instead of testing, we need to focus on building communication. We need to create an environment where both partners feel safe to express their feelings, doubts, and insecurities without fear of judgment. It's not about pretending everything is perfect or pretending that there are no issues. It's about being real. It's about opening up and saying, here's where I'm struggling. Here's where I need you to show up for me. And it's about giving your partner the space to do the same. There's something powerful that happens when both people in a relationship allow themselves to be vulnerable. It's in those moments when you say, I'm afraid of losing you, or I'm worried that I'm not enough, that the real connection happens. Because vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. It takes incredible courage to be open, to let go of the need to control, and to trust that your partner will meet you with compassion, understanding, and love. Of course, this doesn't mean that the relationship will be without challenges. Life is filled with uncertainty and no relationship is perfect. But what it does mean is that when challenges arise, they are faced together, not as adversaries, but as a team. When trust and respect are present, you don't feel the need to test each other or play games. Instead, you lean on each other, supporting each other through the tough times and celebrating the victories together. When both partners are committed to open communication, the relationship becomes a safe haven. There's no need to second guess each other's intentions, no need to wonder if someone is testing you. Instead, there's a sense of shared responsibility for the emotional well-being of each other. It's a relationship where both people know that they are enough, exactly as they are. And when you feel secure in that, you don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to ask for reassurance because the foundation is solid. It's easy to fall into the trap of testing, especially if you've been hurt before or if you've grown up in environments where trust was hard to come by. But if we want to build something lasting, something meaningful, we need to let go of those old patterns. We need to choose trust over doubt, respect over manipulation, and love over fear. Relationships are not about games or power struggles. They're about connection, about meeting each other with an open heart and a willingness to grow together. So instead of testing, let's focus on the hard work of building a relationship rooted in trust and respect. Let's have those open, honest conversations where we can both express our fears and hopes without fear of being judged. Let's create a space where we are free to be ourselves and where we can love each other, not because we've been tested, but because we've chosen to trust, to respect, and to grow together. Men, it's time to stop testing the women in your lives. Women, it's time to stop trying to pass these tests. For far too long, relationships have been reduced to a series of silent emotional games. Games that only serve to create confusion, mistrust, and frustration. The truth is, relationships are not about testing each other. They're about something far more important. They are about trust. They are about vulnerability. They are about showing up for each other, even when we're scared, even when we feel unsure. In the beginning, the tests may feel like small, harmless actions. Maybe it's the emotional withdrawal, the mixed signals, or the little questions designed to gauge commitment. You might think it's a way to get reassurance, to test the waters of your relationship, but over time, these tests add up. And the damage isn't always obvious. It's insidious. It chips away at the very thing you're trying to protect, the bond between you and the person you love. Every test, every moment of uncertainty, every time you pull back to see if they will chase you or prove their loyalty, it creates a crack. That crack widens until one day you look around and realize that what you've built is no longer solid. For the woman on the other side of these tests, the emotional toll is profound. Imagine living in a constant state of uncertainty, never knowing if your partner truly loves you for who you are or if you're just part of an ongoing test. Over time, it wears you down. You start questioning yourself, questioning your worth. You wonder if you're enough. You wonder if the love you're giving is enough. And as those doubts begin to build, you start to feel less and less secure, not just in the relationship, but in yourself. You become exhausted from constantly trying to prove that you are worthy of love, worthy of trust. But the truth is, no one should have to prove their worthiness in a relationship. Love is not a performance. It is not a test of endurance. It is about being seen for who you are, flaws and all, and still being chosen, still being loved. This isn't to say that relationships will be without challenges. They won't. Relationships require work, commitment, and effort. But there's a difference between facing challenges together and playing games with each other's hearts. When you test each other, you're not facing the challenge of life together. You're facing each other as adversaries. You're putting up walls, creating emotional distance, and leaving each other with nothing but questions. But when you choose to stop testing, when you choose to show up as your authentic self, flaws, fears, insecurities, and all, that's when real connection happens. That's when trust is built, because trust isn't about playing games to see who will stay or who will leave. Trust is about being vulnerable enough to show your true self, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable. So let's put the tricks aside. Let's stop the emotional games. Let's stop testing each other and start talking. Let's begin real, honest conversations about what we need, what we fear, and what we hope for. Let's create space where both partners feel safe to express their vulnerabilities without the fear of being judged or rejected. Let's make room for growth, both individually and together. Because when we choose to communicate openly, we create a foundation that is unshakable. We build a relationship that is strong because it is based on mutual respect, not manipulation. It's strong because it is built on the willingness to show up for each other, to understand each other, and to love each other fully. And that's what makes a relationship last. We've all been hurt. We've all been insecure. We've all feared rejection at some point. But love, real love, isn't about hiding those parts of ourselves. It's about showing them and being accepted despite them. When we let go of the tests, we allow the relationship to be real. We stop pretending to be something we're not. We stop fearing that we'll be exposed. And in doing so, we create something lasting, something meaningful, something real. When we drop the tests, we can finally see each other clearly, without fear, without doubt. And that's when we can truly begin to build the relationship we've always wanted, one rooted in love, respect, and trust.